This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Yep, 9 o'clock, your call. Should Abu Hamza and 5 other terrorist suspects be extradited from the UK to America? Right, the European Court of Human Rights is expected to rule shortly. Now, we'll bring you the decision as soon as it happens. I'm staring at banks of television screens and looking at outlets as I speak. They include also this list Babar Ahmad, who's accused of using the internet to raise money for terrorist groups. Amna Ahmad is his sister.
Regardless of beliefs or anything, if a British citizen who's paid his taxes, worked and lived in the United Kingdom, I mean, the evidence has all come from the United Kingdom, why should he have to go to the United States?
But the former US prosecutor David Raskin says the men would be treated fairly.
Our extradition partners around the world can rest assured that the defendants who are extradited will receive fair and just proceedings in criminal cases in the United States.
Well, we're expecting that news soon. What do you think? Should they be extradited to America? 0500 909 693. This morning, should Abu Hamza and 5 other terrorist suspects be extradited from the UK to America? Different men with different charges against them. Abu Hamza, for one, has been convicted of offences, but Babar Ahmad claims he hasn't even heard evidence against him. The number to call is 0500 909 693. You can email breakfast@bbc.co.uk. You can text 85058 as well. And we're going to speak to Tom Newton-Dunn, political editor of The Sun. Hello, Tom. How you doing?
Good morning.
You've got this Sling Your Hook campaign in favour of Abu Hamza's extradition. And also, Pete Weatherby joined us in the studio, QC human rights lawyer. What are your concerns, Pete Weatherby, about the potential extradition to the US?
Well, the concerns are that, first of all, in terms of the extradition process, the evidence isn't put before a British court. In the case of some of these men, in particular Babar Ahmad, as I understand it, the British prosecuting authorities have determined there's not enough evidence to prosecute him. He was in this country for the whole of the period that he's supposed to have been committing these offences, and the offences were committed in this country. So what conceivable purpose there is in extraditing him to the US is anybody's guess.
Do you have a problem with Abu Hamza being extradited to the US?
Well, I have no problem with anyone being extradited if there is cogent evidence of them committing serious criminal offences. In fact, as a human rights lawyer, I would say it's vital to have robust extradition treaties and procedures. But
well, he's been charged with 16 offences,
yeah.
Abu Hamza. 10 counts of soliciting or encouraging people to murder non-Muslims. 4 of those charges related specifically to Jews. 4 counts of using threatening, abusive, insulting behaviour with intent to stir up racial hatred. And also 1 charge of possessing audio and videotapes containing threatening, abusive, insulting material. 1 charge of possessing a document containing information likely to be useful to terrorists, contrary to Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. So these are different men with different cases. Yes, he has. Yeah. Should he? I mean, do you have? Are you worried? Are you worried about his extradition?
Well, first of all, in terms of the extradition process, the answer is yes, because the evidence hasn't been put before a British court.
Right.
In days gone by, the foreign jurisdiction had to establish a prima facie case, and I, as well as many other people, including Liberty, including many people in Parliament, think that is the way that things should be done, because otherwise we are extraditing very often British citizens to other jurisdictions where there may be other problems. But in the case of these men in particular, there are other concerns, and that is that the potential sentences for these men may include life without parole, whole life sentences without any realistic chance of release, however they change or however old they become, they serve 50 years or whatever. And secondly, the conditions themselves, although... So
if he does repent over his vile anti-Semitism, for example, yes, Abu Hamza... Tom Newton-Dunn, come in here.
Well, I think some decent points have been made this morning, but the point is, of course, is that there are 6 different individuals here. All of them are being charged on different offences, some interrelated, but they are very, very different. So Babar Ahmad is a completely different case to Abu Hamza, as you discussed. Now, I think a mistake that might be being made at the moment is to confuse the problems with the extradition process to the US, which have come under some debate here, and legitimately with previous cases, Gary McKinnon, and the very, very different ECHR ruling this morning in 20 minutes' time on whether or not these guys should be extradited as a breach of their human rights or not. Now, the latter argument is the one that we've been shouting about for an awful long time. Funnily enough, we actually splashed Sling Your Hook all over our front page to try and get rid of Abu Hamza way back in 2003. Mm-hmm. So this is not exactly a brand new story. It's all coming to a head this morning, of course, with the ECHR ruling, and it's an absolute fundamental test on the European Court's whole legitimacy, really, and that's what we're obviously looking for.
Well, it isn't a test of the Court of Human Rights legitimacy. The Court of Human Rights has been, without doubt, the most successful international human rights court that there has been. It's led to massive improvements in human rights across Europe, and it's been lauded across the world. If every time there's a difficult decision involving very difficult cases and very unpopular people, if the decision goes against the way that certain politicians or certain newspapers want the result to go, then suddenly the legitimacy of the court is called into question, and that's wrong. I take cases to the Court of Human Rights. I win some and I lose some. The ones I lose, I don't then say that the court is full of idiot judges who aren't competent to do their job. The rule of law requires that we respect the decisions that we like, and we respect the decisions that we don't like. And here,
and you know what, the
issue is, can I finish? Here the issue is whether life without parole is inhuman and degrading.
Why would that be the case, life without parole, Pete?
Because of the charges these men face, because of the situation in the US. That's accepted by the UK government in these cases, as I understand it, that is a very likely sentence, and more than that, they will be sent to a supermax facility which has far harsher regime, including long-term, indeterminate solitary confinement, which the UN has condemned. So, this isn't just some mad...
Okay, 5 terrorism... sorry to interrupt. 5 terrorism suspects, including Abu Hamza and Baba Ahmed, have lost their battle to avoid extradition to the United States.
Common sense prevails, and thank God, I think, is what the Sun would say.
Well, there we go. The Sun suddenly thinks that the Court of Human Rights is a jolly good court because the decision has gone their way.
Well, can I respond to that?
I mean, let's get 0500 909 693. Your responses to that. Let me just reiterate, if I may, gentlemen. 5 terrorism suspects, including Abu Hamza and Baba Ahmed, have lost their battle to avoid extradition to the United States. That's from our Home Affairs editor. And some more news just coming in as I'm speaking on this. Let me just flick around my computer here. Extradition is lawful. That's the phrase.
We couldn't agree more. I think that the issue here is it's all well and good for various human rights lawyers, and your guest here is not the first one, to blame right-wing newspapers, to blame right-wing politicians for having a general rant about what we're doing is reflecting the absolute vast majority of the British public, elected British politicians' views here. This is not the first time that the ECHR could have gone against the will of the entirety of the country, bar about 17 human rights lawyers. Today, finally, they've actually made a popular decision, and by doing so, they've upheld their legitimacy in supporting real human rights, not some sort of twisted version of whatever it is that pleases lawyers. So, hence the court has some legitimacy today, which we're very pleased to hear.
Some people were saying, and you being a sharp-minded lawyer, Pete, will have noticed I said 5 including, whereas 6 men were involved here. 5 terrorism suspects, including Abu Hamza and Baba Ahmed, have lost their battle to avoid extradition. The European Court of Human Rights has adjourned its examination of Haroun Aswat's claim because it requires further details about his mental health problems.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that illustrates the careful consideration that the Court of Human Rights gives. But to come back to what Tom was saying, that Tom knows as well as I do that 97%, these are the actual statistics, 97% of cases taken by UK claimants to the Court of Human Rights fail at the preliminary stages. I don't know, Tom, whether you know how many cases in Strasbourg last year, 2011, were successful against the UK government.
Probably an awful lot more than we would like.
Well,
and the reason is because awful lots of these cases really shouldn't be going to Strasbourg at all. We've got a perfectly decent judicial system.
Well,
it is the misinterpretation of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is what Strasbourg does. And with the greatest respect to you, I don't say this begrudgingly, but an awful lot of lawyers make an awful lot of money out of abusing what used to be a very, very good system.
Well, I can assure you that the lawyers who operate in Strasbourg don't do it for the money. The money in Strasbourg is not something that you'll get fat cat lawyers.
Gentlemen, if I may, stay right where you are. Call soon as well. I'm sure people want to react to this decision. The decision that 5 terrorism suspects, including Abu Hamza and Baba Ahmed, have lost their battle to avoid extradition to the United States. The European Court of Human Rights has ruled they can be extradited to the US to face jail there. This supermax jail situation that Pete was telling us about, the former preacher at London's Finsbury Park Mosque, Abu Hamza, is accused of the kidnap of British and American hostages in Yemen, setting up a terrorist training camp in the US. We can speak to the Liberal Democrat peer Lord Carlisle, who is the government's former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your reaction to this, please, Lord Carlisle.
I think it's an entirely sensible decision. My only regret is that it's taken the European Court of Human Rights the best part of 2 years to reach this decision, which is a symptom of the way in which that court operates. This is a very different case from the case of Gary McKinnon, which turns on health grounds and the safety of Mr. McKinnon going to the United States. All these people are accused of crimes for which they'll receive a fair trial in the United States. And if they have committed crimes that are criminal in the United States, then they must have done so with their eyes open, knowing that they would be potentially subject to very severe sentences. It's also worth bearing in mind that we do have whole life sentences without parole in this country, though happily not too many of them.
Can I just ask you, can I put to you what Baba Ahmed's sister said to us earlier on? She said that he is a British citizen, he's lived and worked and paid taxes in the UK all his life. The allegations outlined by the US were allegedly committed in the UK. He hasn't even been questioned by British police. And she wants all sorts of inquiries. She wants to ask why the evidence the US says it got has not been given to the CPS. She says there are huge matters of principle, and he's been held without charges for an awful long time. Do you think it's right that he is extradited just because the server that he used for his websites, whatever you think about those websites, was based in Connecticut?
The short answer to your question is I do. I admire her filial loyalty to her brother, and it is unfortunate that he's been kept in custody for such a long time. But of course, he had the option to go and be tried in the United States at any time. He has chosen to resist that extradition to the United States. So the British state can hardly be blamed for the time he's spent in custody, particularly in the light of today's ruling. Also, people can now commit crimes all over the world from wherever they happen to be situated. And the jurisdiction for trying them for that crime may be more than one country. If the target of the crime is the United States and what they've done is a crime in the United States, then subject to other issues like, for example, extreme health concerns, as in Gary McKinnon's case, there is absolutely no reason why they should not be tried in the place the crime was aimed at. By the same token, if somebody decided that they wanted to try and bomb the Olympic Games this year, for example, and they happened to be based in a foreign country, we would want to try them here.
A quick response from Pete Weatherby, then we'll speak to Danny Shaw, our Home Affairs correspondent, to flesh all this out for us. Pete Weatherby.
Yeah, good morning, Lord Carlisle.
Good morning, Mr. Weatherby. He and I are very good friends.
We are indeed. And Lord Carlisle makes some very powerful, very good points. But in terms of Baba Ahmed in particular, he's a British citizen. All that he's accused of doing was committed within the United Kingdom. It's been investigated by the British police, who apparently have provided the evidence to the American authorities. and it's been provided to the CPS, who on 2 separate occasions and a third occasion with the Attorney General all decided that there's insufficient evidence to charge him. What conceivable reason is there to extradite a British citizen to America on that basis?
Well, Pete knows a great deal about that case, which I certainly would accept that I do not. Having said that, what may be evidence in the United States may not be evidence in the United Kingdom. The rules of evidence vary, the rules of jurisdiction vary. I know that Pete Weatherby is an enthusiastic supporter of the European Court of Human Rights, and I suspect, Pete, that you'll have a little difficulty not accepting the decision.
Well, let's come to that in a minute, but let's get more on that decision from Danny Shaw. Sorry to keep you waiting there as we had that lawyerly exchange. Danny Shaw, tell us what has happened.
Well, the European Court has paved the way now for the extradition of 5 of the 6 terrorism suspects. Firstly, the one suspect for whom no decision has been made, that's Haroon Aswat. Now, the reason for that is that he is currently at Broadmoor Hospital and is suffering from schizophrenia, and so the European Court has asked for some more questions from the British authorities and from Mr. Aswat's legal representatives before making a final decision about him. But for the 5 others, the Court has said that there will be no violation of their human rights under Article 3, the prohibition of inhuman and degrading treatment, if the suspects were held at the Supermax prison at Florence in Colorado, and if they're sentenced to very long prison terms. On the prison terms, the court said it did not consider that the sentences of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole were grossly disproportionate or amounted to inhuman or degrading treatment. Insofar as them being held at this Supermax jail in Colorado, it said conditions there would not amount to ill treatment. Not all inmates convicted of international terrorism were housed at these sorts of prisons. There were procedural safeguards in place, such as holding a hearing before deciding on a transfer. And as for the restrictive conditions and lack of human contact at this prison, the court said that the US authorities would be justified in considering these people, if convicted, a significant security risk, and therefore it would be justified to impose strict limits on who they can contact with. There would also, the court said, be a real possibility that they could move towards less restrictive conditions as they progress through their sentence and could possibly be transferred to a normal prison. So this means that Babar Ahmad, Abu Hamza and the other people who had taken this case will be extradited. There is the possibility that they can appeal to the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights. This was a decision by the single chamber of 7 judges. They could go to the Grand Chamber, but that is a very slim possibility. Only a very small number of cases are heard by the Grand Chamber, and an even smaller number actually succeed.
Pete Weatherby seems to think that the Grand Chamber option is slightly more than a remote possibility.
Yes, obviously I've not seen this judgment yet because it's come through whilst we've been on air. But there were a series of UK cases about whole life tariffs very recently, and I know because I'm involved in one of those cases that they are in fact subject to an application to go to the Grand Chamber. I would anticipate, I don't know because I don't represent any of these men, I would anticipate that there will be an application to go to the Grand Chamber in these cases. Because of the seriousness of them, I would anticipate that the Grand Chamber would want to hear these cases.
I mean, what's interesting about that is that, I mean, I haven't seen the full judgment, but what I have got is a press release from the European Court. And in terms of the length of sentences, I mean, it deals with that in 2 very short paragraphs. Most of this press release is concerned about the conditions at the Supermax prison, which suggests that perhaps that was more the sort of pertinent point, the point of contention. I mean, it simply just dismisses the question of whether they can have life sentence without parole, saying it is not grossly disproportionate.
Tom Newton-Dunn, is this rather taking the wind out of your sails? The European Court of Human Rights making a decision which you agree with,
No, it's terrific. It's terrific news.
But you were all keyed up, weren't you? You had your headlines for tomorrow written. I'm just looking at some of the papers kind of in your court today. I mean, the European Court ruling may see Hamza walk free, says the Mail, and I haven't got the Sun handy. But
Nicky,
this would have been grist to your mill, wouldn't it, if the decision had gone the other way?
If you can probably forgive us, Nicky, you and your many, many millions of listeners, for just wanting to cover our tracks in case the ECHR were to decide something wholly revolting to the vast majority of British people. But no, we're delighted by this, and you know, this is the great mythology set out again by Pete this morning, with the greatest respect to him, that, you know, nasty right-wing newspapers, nasty right-wing politicians hate human rights, and we want to see the back of a lot of it. We like human rights. We like Winston Churchill for setting up the court in the first place and the convention in the first place. But the point is that, you know, balmy rulings such as allowing Abu Qatada to walk the streets of London at the moment, albeit for a retained period, undermine their entire legitimacy. So when the court does something like this today, it gives us great hope for the future that we may be on the cusp of some sort of sensible reform.
There we are. Right, listen, I'm going to get quick reactions from callers we've got so far to this. We've got Tom in Wigan, Peter in Durham, Stephen Morecambe, Malcolm in Grimsby. Can I ask you all for very, very quick reactions, please? Is this the right decision? Peter in Durham.
Hi. I'll tell you what, if our legal system cannot deal with them, to get a fair trial in England, they should have put the case in front of them. If you're going to get a fair trial in America, or send them back somewhere else, you're going to get a fair trial wherever you do it, and if you've got a case, you should put the case. You shouldn't just lock them up for nothing.
Okay, Abu Hamza is not locked up. Malcolm in Grimsby, your reaction, is this the right decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been locked up for a very long time without any trial. If they're going to be tried, the British citizens should be tried over here, not sent abroad, not sent to America. America would not send their citizens anywhere else to be tried. That's a more or less a ground rule there, so why shouldn't we have the same?
Tom Newton-Dunn, are you still there?
I'm still here.
All right, we've got Bab Ahmed's sister back with us. What's your reaction to this, Amna Ahmad?
Yes, we are very, very disappointed in the ruling today, but it just brings into question the questions that we've been raising earlier on today, that what has gone wrong in Barbara's case. I mean, and we're calling for a public inquiry with even more urgency now, that the evidence should have been it should have been looked at properly by the Crown Prosecution Service, but it was shipped across to the United States. It was subcontracted out to the United States. The issue of sovereignty becomes a more serious one today, that why are British citizens that are being accused of crimes that can be prosecuted in Britain being outsourced to the United States? Why is that happening?
Okay, Tom Newton-Dunn, perhaps you can explain why you're so pleased about the fact that her brother, it looks like her brother will be extradited. Feel free to speak to her, Tom, and explain your situation, your position.
Well, we are very pleased about Abu Hamza. Abu Hamza has been the focus of our attention for some 9 or 10 years now. Your brother's case is entirely separate. The one thing I would say, though, is, of course, that we do have some respect for the US authorities. And if your brother is an innocent man, then I'm sure he'll be found so in a US court and suitably compensated.
But why should he face trial in the United States? We believe in extradition as a principle for people who commit crimes in the United States and then flee back to another country. But why should he face trial in the United States when all the evidence was collected in the UK? He's a British man, paid his taxes, worked hard in Britain. He should be protected by his government.
Well, I agree, and look, it's not our ruling. As
you agree?
I agree.
When the ruling came through, you said this was a victory for common sense.
We're talking about Abu Hamza. Now, the Baba Ahmed case is completely different. I'm not sitting in judgment on Baba Ahmed. I'm not sitting in judgment on any of this. I'm really reflecting the views of our readers and MPs, etc. All I would say is that the Baba Ahmed case is a very, very difficult, complex one. Abu Hamza is very simple, but we still have relatively large amounts of faith in the US justice system, that if your brother is an innocent man, he will be found so.
Okay, do you believe that to be the case? If your brother is an innocent man, Dr. Ahmed, he will be found to be just that, and he will come home?
Well, my brother is an innocent man. We've always maintained that. But the issue is that if he's extradited, firstly, he faces pre-trial detention conditions of solitary confinement. So before he's even been put on trial, he could be stuck in solitary confinement for literally years. I mean, Chris Tappin, he's in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day with the bright lights on. And you know, I mean, that's completely absurd. And there's no pressure on the United States to hurry up with the trial or anything. It could just be away from his family, away from everybody, just sitting there in solitary confinement.
Lord Carlisle, what about that consideration?
Other aspects of the American penal system that I dislike very much, but the fact is that it's a sovereign country. It's a sovereign country we respect. The European Court of Human Rights deals with some pretty unsavory countries that are members of the Council of Europe, including, for example, the Russian penal system. And I do not think that this is an issue which is really a proper one for consideration by the court once they find that it's a legitimate system which is not non-compliant with Article 3. We have a clear decision now. And you know, I don't want to argue with Dr. Ahmed because she's commendably loyal to her brother, though not in a position finally to judge the facts of the case. But the reality of the situation is that if I commit a crime in America while sitting at my desk in the Houses of Parliament, that is a crime in America, and on the face of it, the Americans are entitled to try me for it. The way the internet works makes that a common occurrence, unfortunately.
Dr. Ahmad? Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry, I completely disagree with that point, because at the end of the day, the evidence was all collected from the UK and handed over to the United States. These crimes that he's been alleged to have committed are prosecutable crimes in the United Kingdom. But
that doesn't mean it has to be tried in the United Kingdom. There are many cases. There are many cases heard before the courts every day of the week in this country. I have been involved as a barrister in some of them, in which evidence is collected in different parts of the world. I've been in a case fairly recently in which part of the crime was committed in the United States, part of it was committed in the United Kingdom, and a decision was made to try it in the United Kingdom. That's a perfectly legitimate
that decision was never made properly. That decision was never made. The Crown Prosecution Service
review of the Crown
Prosecution Service has admitted that they were never given all of the evidence in relation to Barbara's case. So there has been a bypassing of due process. We're calling for a public inquiry.
There's been no decision that the Crown Prosecution Service acted improperly, and it was, of course,
I'm sorry, they have
actually
admitted.
No, it was open to your
brother.
They've
admitted in writing.
All right, well, let's get Pete. Have they acted improperly, Pete Weatherby? The Crown Prosecution Service?
No, absolutely not. The reason there's been no judicial review of the decision...
What's this about? They've admitted it in writing.
Is that
Dr. Ahmed saying, what's this all about?
Is that the CPS have decided on two separate occasions that there's insufficient evidence to charge Barbara.
No, I'm sorry. They actually have admitted that they were not shown all of the evidence.
Yes.
They admitted in November 2011, when the Westminster Hall debate was taking place, that they were never shown all of the evidence in relation to Barbara Ahmed's case.
Yes, indeed.
Why were they not shown all of that evidence? How could they base the facts of it being insufficient if they were never even shown all of it?
Because it's not for the Crown Prosecution Service to judge a crime committed in America.
What do you feel will happen to your brother, Amna, now?
Well, firstly, our biggest grievance is with the British government, that why they're subcontracting their cases across to the United States when they've got a sound legal system.
If he goes there and stands for trial, what do you fear will happen?
Well, like I mentioned before, I'm worried about him being in solitary confinement. Pre-trial. So before he's even been judged to have been guilty or innocent, he's away from his family, he's away from his lawyers. He doesn't have proper, adequate access to his lawyers. I mean, Chris Tappin hasn't even been accused of terror-related offences.
Do you think it will be a fair trial?
I don't think even he should have to face trial in the United States. So fair or not fair doesn't even come into play. He should be facing trial in the United Kingdom. Our government has some serious questions they need to answer.
Thank you very much.
What has gone wrong in this case?
Well, listen, thank you again for coming on. And thank you, Lord Carlisle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your reaction to this? 0500...
indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.
It's all right.
Okay.
Whoever's talking, it's all right. And it's very appreciated. The whole thing is very appreciated. But Tom Newton-Dunn, thank you very much indeed as well for your time. We heard from Danny Shaw too. And we heard the news this morning, just to reiterate what is happening. The European Court of Human Rights has decided that the extradition of these 5 terrorist suspects is lawful. One of the 6, Haroun Aswat's claim, has been adjourned. they've adjourned examination of that because it requires further details about his mental health problems. But we have the situation that 5 will be extradited, barring what Danny Shaw said is an unlikely appeal. So it looks like they're, in all likelihood, states-bound. It's 9:34. 0500 909 693. So the extradition of 5 of the 6 terrorist suspects to the United States has been adjudged by the European Court of Human Rights to be lawful. The decision on one is adjourned. Right, let's get reactions to this. Mike is in Sittingbourne. We've still got Pete Weatherby for a final comment in a second. Mike's in Sittingbourne in Kent. Nadim's in Doncaster. Joy's in Worthing. Aurora's in Bristol. Nadim, what do you think?
Well, my view is simply this. I think, and I agree with Lord Carlisle, if you commit a crime in a particular country, you should be actually tried by that country, by the judiciary in that country. And just to actually not put a finer point on that, I mean, in Afghanistan, the US soldier who savaged and murdered those 16 innocent civilians, and even though he committed the crime in Afghanistan, the Americans very quickly took him over to the US for protection or for whatever reasons. Now, from my perspective, it just almost stinks of double standards, and I would just simply like to see a process where there is equity in terms of the way the international communities actually relate to citizens. I mean, in terms of this country, I just think, I'm hoping that these people aren't being judged based on their race, ethnicity or faith, and actually just being judged on the acts which haven't actually been proven as yet.
Well, we've heard much mention of Mr. Tapin. Do you seriously think there's an element of ethnicity here?
Well, from my perspective, there is an issue in terms of equity in terms of citizenship. From my perspective, I'm somebody who's from a particular ethnic background, and I was actually born here, so on and so forth. And then I actually just think about the way, if you like, there's almost a differentiation in terms of treatment of citizens based on whether, irrespective of whether they were naturalised or
Pete Weatherby, come in on this. Pete Weatherby,
there are lots of
serious charges, though.
Yeah, there are a lot of good things about US justice, but there are also quite a lot of bad things about it. And one of the bad things about it is the war on terror has very seriously skewed the US approach to so-called terrorist suspects, and you've got the outrages of rendition and allegations of torture, and you've got Guantanamo Bay, and so there are large question marks over how people, particularly Islamists, are to be treated, and that's one of the many reasons why, where the offences have been committed in this country, as certainly appears to be the case, or the allegations of the offences committed in this country appear to be the case, why these suspects should be tried here.
Mike in Sittingbourne, what do you think?
Well, I agree with them being sent there. I agree that that gentleman that's mentally ill at the moment, he's in Broadmoor, he shouldn't be sent because he might not be mentally competent for what the crime he's done. Mm-hmm. I agree that that bloke that was selling those things to, or is alleged to have sold to Iran, I believe he should be sent. But by the same fact, I agree with that first gentleman from up in the Midlands there, that the American that slaughtered, and you can't say much, it was slaughter, those children and women, whatever, should be tried in Afghanistan, right, because that's where he committed the crime. Maybe, I don't know, I might be wrong, but it sends, finally, the European court, I call it a tribunal, have all of a sudden been told by the French government, I'm telling you, and the Germans, we're starting to get people killing us over here because they just had some murders by a terrorist. I'm not Islamophobic. I've got great faith.
Hang on a minute, Mike. He's impugning the objectivity and impartiality of these judges, Pete Weatherby.
Yeah, well, the Court of Human Rights, like any other court anywhere, gets some decisions right and some wrong. I'm not capable of saying whether this decision is right or wrong. I'm personally disappointed at it at the moment, but as Lord Carlisle said, if you believe in the rule of law, you have to respect the decisions you agree with or not.
Aurora in Bristol, good morning. What do you want to say?
Oh, good morning. Well, I just think the decision is right because we have certain laws in place, and if somebody commits a crime, even if they're operating in one country and they're causing havoc in another country, they should still be extradited, because they can't sort of hide in one country and go on the internet and muster up sort of people to commit crimes in other countries. They need to be extradited to the country where they caused the havoc.
Peter in Eastbourne. Hello, Peter.
Otherwise, it could.
Hello there.
Hello. Sorry, you made your point very well, Aurora. We're getting an awful lot of calls. Do forgive me, but I think you said what you came on to say.
It could encourage more people to go to countries where they're more lenient.
Right.
And thinking that they can, operate in one country where the justice system is a bit more lenient and cause havoc in another country.
Point taken. Thank you. Peter, on you go. Good morning.
Yes, good morning to you. Well, I think because there's different, defendants in these cases, one has to be careful about just coming to a blanket decision. But I think there is one positive outcome to this. It'll perhaps deter people who may sit down at their computer and want to perhaps incite hatred, not, to think twice. I mean, I think, I know the religious card isn't being played, but from an Islamic point of view, it's a peaceful religion, and people don't want to be seeing images.
Are you a Muslim?
Yes. I don't want to see people don't want to see, like myself anyway, and lots of Muslims I know, we don't want to see images of a Russian soldier being summarily executed because he wouldn't stand up after being captured during the war in Afghanistan. This is totally against our beliefs, that sort of thing. And it
brings a disgrace on your religion.
Absolutely. This is a human, like any other human. And if any Muslim believes that they're superior to others, they just have to read the Quran properly and see how God deals with that, and learn their religion and understand that their Prophet Muhammad, our Prophet Muhammad, and the Quran came as a mercy to all mankind. And if we were engaged in this exercise of mercy, we wouldn't find ourselves in potentially difficult situations. And that's not to say anything about the innocence of Babu Ahmed.
It seems with Abu Hamza that it's suddenly that those attitudes are really, incredibly deep-seated. I did a couple of television shows with him over the years, and after one of them, Pete, he was great. It was produced by a very, very good friend of mine, a girl called Camilla, and after the show, we were going along the corridor, and I was behind him, and after the debate, he turned to Omar Bakri Mohammed, and he said, we were stitched up by the Jewess to her. And I thought that certainly at the time betrayed a very deep-seated, vile anti-Semitism, which has certainly come out in his speeches. And he clearly, Peter, and isn't he hearing from you being a Muslim, he clearly, when he was making those speeches in Finsbury Park, fired up an awful lot of young men, didn't he?
Well, I was in Finsbury Park at the time. I was a young lecturer then, and I couldn't use that mosque because of him. And he took away people's rights, and this in that particular instance. And what we couldn't believe at the time as Muslims, we were saying, can't the police just go and arrest him? The things he's saying, are liable to create hatred and may lead to violence. And we were pleased when many, many years later he was put behind bars. And these people have nothing to do with Islam. They have some sort of agenda, God knows what it is, and they have a vile attitude to humanity based on people's religion. It's just totally contrary to Islam.
When did you convert or revert?
84. April 84.
Right, okay.
In Dewsbury Mosque, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you for your call.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the discussion. It's very, very interesting.
Thank you. It's 9:50, and for your contributions this morning, Pete, very, very welcome. If you have to dash, you probably have
I do.
An office to go to.
I do indeed, a court to go to.
A final thought.
Well, the contributions have all raised very serious and interesting issues. The Court of Human Rights today has only been able to consider a very narrow area, which is the Article 3 rights of these men, which are whether they're potential treatment in the US is inhuman and degrading. There are, of course, wider issues on the extradition issue, which we've all seen with the McKinnon case and the other cases. Let me finish by posing a question. If Baba Ahmed, for example, was a US citizen and he had committed all the acts which are said to be criminal in the US, would he be extradited?
With a website based in
Milton Keynes or Salford. Would he be extradited to the UK? I think not.
It's 9:52, and Sir Nicky Campbell now, former Liberal Democrat leader, a man who's been in a few courts in his time, but for all the right reasons. A member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your reaction to this ruling, Sir Nicky?
Well, I think it will do a great deal for the reputation of the court. But of course, and I'd got the tail end of one of your earlier contributors, you've got to look very carefully at the reasoning which lies behind the judgment before drawing too many general principles. But perhaps now we can have a rational and measured discussion about the importance of the court, the importance of human rights in a democracy such as our own.
Have you been following the case, for example, Abu Hamza and Baba Ahmed are two very different cases. Have you been following the case of Baba Ahmed?
Indeed, I have.
Are you confident? I mean, why wasn't he charged? Why wasn't he charged? Yes, and tried in this country.
That must have been a decision taken by the prosecuting authorities, and of course, traditionally, by convention, they don't reveal their reasoning except in very, very unusual circumstances.
Does it trouble you? Does his case trouble you?
Well, I've been troubled. I've been troubled by all of these cases because of the fact that they raised very important issues of principle which it didn't seem possible to resolve. It would appear that the judgment today has helped us towards that conclusion. But, for example, the length of time that people have been in custody waiting an outcome to the issue of extradition is obviously in some cases far, far too long. We need what the lawyers call an expedited procedure so that we can deal with these cases much more swiftly and much more effectively.
Baba Ahmed was free to go at any time for trial in the US, though. That's the point.
Yes, that's true. Yes, but I was making a general point.
Yeah, right, okay. But he's a British citizen, he's lived and worked and paid taxes in the UK. This is what his sister said. The allegations outlined by the US were allegedly committed in the UK. These websites, pro-Afghan and Chechnyan, whatever the word would be, terrorists, many would say. But the only connection to America would seem to be the fact that that the server was based in Connecticut. Is that legitimate?
Well, remember that the American system of jurisdiction, there isn't just one system. There's a federal system, and then every state has its own system. But some of the systems in the United States take account of what's called, I'm afraid this is a bit extraterritorial jurisdiction. They have a willingness to assume jurisdiction in respect of acts which may have been committed elsewhere if they have consequences in the United States. And that's an argument which has arisen in a number of other cases. But I think that here, again, as I've said, we must look at the detail as to whether or not these decisions depend on the particular circumstances of the individuals and of their cases, or whether there's more general principle to be derived from them.
And the question that we were left with by the previous guest, Pete Weatherby, the lawyer, when he said if it were the other way around and all the alleged crimes had been committed in the United States, bar the fact that the server was the computer server, the internet server was based in Milton Keynes, do you think that he would be extradited from the United States to face charges here? Is this extradition treaty, is it equitable? Is it equitable?
You heard me say on a number of occasions that there is a distinction between reasonable suspicion, which is what allows for extradition from Britain to the United States, and probable cause, I believe, a higher standard, which is necessary in relation to extradition from the United States to the United Kingdom. But I don't think that arises in this particular case unless there's a section of the judgment which deals with it, and that's why I'm a little reluctant to be drawn on to that particular point, other than to say, as I think I've said to you already, I think this will be good for the reputation of the court and ought to allow us the opportunity of a more rational and considered discussion about these matters.
Right, okay, thank you very much indeed. Paul, quick reactions please, we haven't got a lot of time. Paul in Leeds, what do you think?
My concern is that if this was a case about some Chinese or Russian dissidents in London, I don't know the situation of our extradition agreements with those countries. However, I know for certain we wouldn't be sending them back to their countries. I think this is so political, and I think our extradition treaty needs to be made more, as you said, equitable.
Thank you. Joy in Worthing.
I believe that this extradition should be stopped now, because if we consider the issue, Parliament passed a resolution last December calling for extradition laws to be urgently amended to stop people like Baba Ahmed being extradited. The Joint Committee on Human Rights and the Home Affairs Select Committee made similar recommendations. So this extradition, if it goes ahead, is against the sovereignty of the UK Parliament.
Stephen,
Parliament should change. Parliament wants to change the law.
Please, lady. Great news. The European Court has got no integrity, but for once they got something right. Let's get all the semantics. These people are guilty. Most of them aren't even British citizens. They're coming on bogus tickets. And let's feel no sympathy for Baba Ahmed. He ran a website called Azam.com. It was a jihad website. I feel no sympathy for him. I'm looking forward to seeing them all over to America. Throw away the key, lock them up for life. It's a shame they haven't got the death penalty to get rid of them permanently.
Theresa May has just sent a statement. I welcome the decision of the European Court of Human Rights to allow the extradition of Abu Hamza and other terror suspects. In 5 of the 6 cases, the court found that extradition would not breach their human rights, and in the remaining case, it asked for further information before taking a final decision. I will work to ensure that the suspects are handed over to the US authorities as quickly as possible. Tony in Blackburn, hi.
Hi there. That's interesting, isn't it? Excuse me. Full of a cold. The Court of Human Rights decision. Well, basically what I'd say is that Iraq, Israel, Libya, People's Republic of China, Qatar, Yemen and the United States, what have they all got in common?
Death penalty.
Nope. No, none of them have signed up to the International Criminal Court.
Right.
And I don't think we would have a phone in saying, oh, should we have an agreement with Iraq, or should we have an agreement with Qatar or Yemen? But yet we've got one with the United States. They're all a bunch of dodgy countries. United States is one of the dodgiest countries going.
Stephen? He's gone. But never mind. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, Tony in Blackburn, Stephen in Surrey, Joy in Worthing, and all our other callers and contributors. The great and the good. It's 5 Live Breakfast. Thank you very much for listening. The implications of this result will unfold throughout the day, and the debate will continue, no doubt. Stephen is next. 4 of those charges related specifically to Jews. 4 counts of using threatening, abusive, insulting behaviour with intent to stir up racial hatred. And also 1 charge of possessing audio and videotapes containing threatening, abusive, insulting material. 1 charge of possessing a document containing information likely to be useful to terrorists, contrary to Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. So these are different men with different cases. Yes, he has. Yeah. Should he? I mean, do you have? Are you worried? You're worried about his extradition?
Well, first of all, in terms of the extradition process, the answer is yes, because the evidence hasn't been put before a British court.
Right.
In days gone by, the foreign jurisdiction had to establish a prima facie case, and I, as well as many other people, including Liberty, including many people in Parliament, think that is the way that things should be done, because otherwise we are extraditing very often British citizens to other jurisdictions where there may be other problems. But in the case of these men in particular, there are other concerns, and that is that the potential sentences for these men may include life without parole, whole life sentences without any realistic chance of release, however they change or however old they become, they serve 50 years or whatever.
0500 909 693. You can email breakfast@bbc.co.uk. You can text 85058 as well. And we're going to speak to Tom Newton-Dunn, political editor of The Sun. Hello, Tom. How are you doing?
Good morning.
You've got this Sling Your Hook campaign in favour of Abu Hamza's extradition. And also, Pete Weatherby joined us in the studio, QC human rights lawyer. What are your concerns, Pete Weatherby, about the potential extradition to the US?
Well, the concerns are that, first of all, in terms of the extradition process, the evidence isn't put before a British court. In the case of some of these men, in particular Baba Ahmed, as I understand it, the British prosecuting authorities have determined there's not enough evidence to prosecute him. He's he was in this country for the whole of the period that he's supposed to have been committing these offences, and the offences were committed in this country. So what conceivable purpose there is in extraditing him to the US is anybody's guess.
Do you have a problem with Abu Hamza being extradited to the US?
Well, I have no problem with anyone being extradited if there is cogent evidence of them committing serious criminal offences. In fact, as a human rights lawyer, I would say it's vital to have robust extradition treaties and procedures. But
well, he's been charged with 16 offences, Abu Hamza. 10 counts of soliciting or encouraging people to murder non-Muslims.
And secondly, the conditions themselves, although...
So if he does repent over his vile anti-Semitism, for example,
yes,
Abu Hamza... Tom Newton-Dunn, come in here.
Well, I mean, some decent points have been made this morning. But the point is, of course, is there are 6 different individuals here. All of them are being charged on different offences, some interrelated. But they are very, very different. So Babar Ahmed is a completely different case to Abu Hamza, as you discussed. Now, I think a mistake that might be being made at the moment is to confuse the problems with the extradition process to the US, which have come under some debate here, and legitimately with previous cases, Gary McKinnon, and the very, very different ECHR ruling this morning in 20 minutes' time on whether or not these guys should be extradited as a breach of their human rights or not. Now, the latter argument is the one that we've been shouting about for an awful long time. Funnily enough, we actually splashed Sling Your Hook all over our front page to try and get rid of Abu Hamza way back in 2003. So this is not exactly a brand new story. It's all coming to a head this morning, of course, with the ECHR ruling, and it's an absolute fundamental test on the European Court's whole legitimacy, really, and that's what we're obviously looking for.
Well, it isn't a test of the Court of Human Rights legitimacy. The Court of Human Rights has been, without doubt, the most successful international human rights court that there has been. It's led to massive improvements in human rights across Europe, and it's been lauded across the world. If every time there's a difficult decision involving very difficult cases and very unpopular people, if the decision goes against the way that certain politicians or certain newspapers want the result to go, then suddenly the legitimacy of the court is called into question, and that's wrong. I take cases to the Court of Human Rights. I win some and I lose some. The ones I lose, I don't then say that the court is full of idiot judges who aren't competent to do their job. The rule of law requires that we respect the decisions that we like, and we respect the decisions that we don't like. And here,
and you know what the
issue is. Can I finish? Here the issue is whether life without parole is inhuman and degrading.
Why would that be the case? Life without parole, Pete?
Because of the charges these men face, because of the situation in the US. That's accepted by the UK government in these cases, as I understand it, that is a very likely...
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Yep, 9 o'clock, your call. Should Abu Hamza and 5 other terrorist suspects be extradited from the UK to America? Right, the European Court of Human European Court of Human Rights is expected to rule shortly. Now, we'll bring you the decision as soon as it happens. I'm staring at banks of television screens and looking at outlets as I speak. They include also this list Babar Ahmed, who's accused of using the internet to raise money for terrorist groups. Amna Ahmed is his sister.
Regardless of beliefs or anything, if a British citizen who's paid his taxes, worked and lived in the United Kingdom, I mean, the evidence has all come from the United Kingdom, why should he have to go to the United States?
But the former US prosecutor David Raskin says the men would be treated fairly.
Our extradition partners around the world can rest assured that the defendants who are extradited will receive fair and just proceedings in criminal cases in the United States.
Well, we're expecting that news soon. What do you think? Should they be extradited to America? 0500 909 693. This morning, should Abu Hamza and 5 other terrorist suspects be extradited from the UK to America? Different men with different charges against them. Abu Hamza, for one, has been convicted of offences, but Babar Ahmed claims he hasn't even had evidence against him. The number to call is